And I'm very delighted to introduce our speaker for today, who is Dr. Marius Dorobantu. He's just been appointed as Assistant Professor of Theology and Artificial Intelligence at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam, and he's also a Fellow of the ISSR. Marius received his PhD in Ethics from Strasbourg University, studying the potential theological implications of human-level artificial intelligence for the notions of human distinctiveness and the image of God. And he's already published extensively at the interaction of AI and religion. His first book is in press with Cambridge University Press and has the title Artificial Intelligence and the Image of God, Are We More Than Intelligent Machines? His top title today is The Quest for Human-Level AI and Its Implications for Theological Anthropology. So welcome, Marius, to come and speak to us.
Finding out that there is extraterrestrial life in the universe would be tantalizing. But finding out that we are completely alone would be equally so, if not more. Think about it. As a theologian, I don't know which of these two possibilities I find more exciting or frightening, but I'm sure they would both have tremendous relevance for how I think about everything else. Is it possible to endow a computer with a human-level intelligence? Whether the answer is yes or no, as a theologian, I think it is equally momentous. Actually, I'm surprised that not everyone is thinking about this question all the time. Because the attempt to build generally intelligent computers, AI, is a massive scientific experiment unfolding before our eyes, live, with deep philosophical and theological stakes. This outrageous effort to create artificial human-like entities can be regarded as a rich source of theological insights, regardless of whether it succeeds or fails. I think we can learn both from its failures and its successes. Both outcomes are equally exciting and terrifying, as with aliens. It would be fascinating if we could somehow manage to replicate human-like cognition in a machine. I'm not saying it would be good, I'm just saying it would be fascinating. But it would be equally fascinating, if not more so, to demonstrate that it is utterly impossible. Think about it. What could that mean? So when I look at what's going on in AI, the developments happening at this blistering pace, the two questions I'm inclined to ask are, what does it mean and what can we learn from it? Other colleagues are drawn to different questions, perhaps a bit more critical to what's going on. But to understand my particular inclination, let me tell you a little bit about my journey, which unsurprisingly has something to do with Michael Faraday. In 2014, I was watching this wonderful mini-series called Cosmos, A Space-Time Odyssey, presented by astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. Well, people in the science and religion community might have strong feelings about him, and for good reasons. He's one of the people mocking religion and pushing a very scientific picture of the world. But part of the show were these Disney-like animations depicting important moments in the history of science, and one of them featured Michael Faraday. He's famous for achieving all his great insights without much formal education. And the way they chose to illustrate that was a very heartbreaking scene of young Faraday being kicked out of school for having a minor speech impairment that's preventing him from pronouncing R correctly. So this evil teacher asks him to say his name out loud, and then he says, Michael Faraday, and she kicks him out. She kicks young Faraday out. Now, I don't expect this to be historically accurate in any way, but it still made such a strong impression on me, so much so that I adopted the nickname Faraday for the online servers where I was playing this strategy game called Go that I had been obsessed with since childhood. So in the late 90s, I would take pride that whereas chess had already been mastered by computers, with IBM's Watson defeating Garry Kasparov in '97, the game of Go was far too complex for that. I thought it was because Go had something magic or transcendent to it. Later, I would find out that it was just because of its sheer complexity, masked by its simple rules. So there are more potential developments on a Go board than there are atoms in the observable universe. So a computer could never use brute force search as they did with chess. Brute force search means, simply put, exploring all the relevant potential continuations of a certain position. With Go, that would take billions of years. To truly master the game, a computer would need to understand its principles, just like a human player does. But here comes the tricky bit. These principles are very hard to capture or encode in words or numbers. Human Go masters talk about elusive notions like harmony on the board, or that move felt strong, or it was aesthetically pleasing. So you see how the game combines both hemispheres of the brain in a certain sense. Well, good luck teaching that to a computer. Only 2 years after changing my nickname to Fawadai, and much, much earlier than most people expected, though, something horrific happened. The AI program AlphaGo, developed by Google DeepMind, defeated Lee Sedol, the so-called Roger Federer of the game of Go, in a 5-games match by 4-1. I was in tears of disbelief as I watched live, and it is the thing that made me turn my attention to AI. As I was slowly digesting what had just happened, these two questions, what does it mean and what can we learn from it, grew increasingly strong in my mind. What does it mean that the machine can do this thing that we thought was so typically human, and that it can do it at a superhuman level? Does it mean that we are also nothing but machines? I was quite a naive theologian student at that time. What if machines could do that with all the things we consider typically human? Could we still regard ourselves as distinctive creatures, and if so, how? And the learning part, well, if machines are now playing Go at a superhuman level, is there anything new that we can learn from their superhuman play? Ever since childhood, I had wondered whether something like the perfect game of Go existed. Like in other strategy games, if you're familiar with that, there are time-tested openings and approaches that have been found to be close to ideal. But my question was, how close? Of course, as a mediocre player, I was in no position to ever approach such a question. But human Go masters had perfected these techniques throughout centuries. But surely there must have existed other possibilities that no one had even thought of. Well, long story short, with AI mastering the game of Go, the Go community has experienced something close to a renaissance. There is a sense, there is a technical detail worth sharing now. The AI that defeated Lee Sedol, AlphaGo, was still initially trained on thousands of human expert games. So it would just look at that games and somehow draw some patterns of how the best human players approach the game. Even with that kind of training, so it was a bit contaminated in a sense with our way of playing the game. But even so, it was capable of producing very novel things. For example, the famous shoulder hit move 37 in game 2 that everybody thought was nonsensical, and it proved to be the cornerstone that that decided the entire game, but it was only obvious many moves later. So it was already producing novelty. Well, a further iteration of that software called AlphaGo 0 was trained very differently. So instead of showing it human games, they just taught it the rules and they asked it to play against itself ad nauseam. Well, for about 3 days, it played against itself, which in computing time is a represent eons. After 3 days, it was capable of defeating its previous version by 100 games to nil. And those 100 games were then released by the DeepMind team and have been studied with fascination by human players. They are new materials. Everybody just flocked around to see what to make sense of them. AlphaGo Zero was playing like an alien. Weird, but mesmerizing and ruthlessly successful. Digesting those insights has forever altered how humans approach the game. Our understanding of the game is undoubtedly enriched. Well, that's how I came to my second question. What if we could similarly learn new exciting things from AI in other domains? It is already happening in drug discovery, for example, through AlphaFold, and in other natural sciences too. But how would that look like for philosophy or theology? Well, we could speculate about the kind of theology that advanced robots might produce, but I'm not going to venture into that today. Today, I'm only going to speculate on the kind of conclusions we can draw from the history of AI so far, and how both its achievements and failures can provide valuable insights, new data, if you may, for theological reflection, especially on questions of human nature. I emphasize that this does not mean that theology is somehow subdued or determined by AI. But I think that as the queen of the sciences, as theology used to be considered, it stands much to benefit from a high-level reflection on the developments that are happening in science. And sometimes, what we learn about the world and about ourselves through the sciences looks quite challenging for our established theologies, this might be an excellent opportunity to clarify and refine our theological theories. A crisis is something too good to waste, as the quote attributed to Churchill goes. And this is what happened to theological anthropology with Darwinism, for example, and I think it might happen today again with AI. Let me explain. So theological anthropology, at least in the Judeo-Christian tradition, revolves around this notion of that humans are a distinctive type of creature made in the image and likeness of God, imago Dei. This is the central tenet of theological anthropology, and it is central to our identity, theologically speaking. It is connected to everything else in theology, so it holds together ethics, Christology, eschatology. It is, if you want, the only thing we know for sure, if I can use that word, about ourselves. We know that we are created in the image of God. And the prominence of this doctrine is also enhanced by the fact that it is mentioned in the very first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1. The trouble is that it's been difficult to explain what it means. We know there must be some sort of similarity between us and God, but what could it consist of? The Bible provides, unfortunately, little clue as to what imago Dei might be. We don't know what the author thought when he used that word. But most theologians who attempted to explain the notion throughout the centuries tied it to a common sense intuition that it must have something to do with our intellect and intelligence. God is intelligent, right? And intelligence is what seems to differentiate us from the animals. So also the Aristotelian idea that we are the rational animal was very influential. So this understanding of imago Dei has been dubbed a substantial or structural interpretation because it locates the divine image within a certain intellectual ability that humans possess, usually reason. It has been dominant in theological anthropology up until quite recent times, or as long as it was uncontroversial to regard ourselves as uniquely intelligent and thus quite ontologically different from the animals. But starting with the scientific revolution, and in particular with the advent of evolutionary theory, the substantial interpretation has faced increasingly difficult questions. Firstly, because we learned that humans were created from the same stuff as the animals, that we were related to all the other life forms on the planet. We came into being through the same evolutionary processes. And also because our attempts to find the intellectual capacity that is uniquely human have also proven futile. Rationality, tool use, language, self-awareness, theory of mind, moral behavior, meta-representation, anticipatory planning, or an aesthetic sense, have all been proposed to be the feature that distinguishes us from the animals. Nonetheless, for each such proposal, we have gradually become aware of at least a few other animals that possess that supposedly unique human ability, albeit to a different degree. So as Darwin put it, the difference between mind between man and higher animals, great as it is certainly one of degree and not of kind. So what happens next is very interesting and exciting, because instead of capitulating, theological anthropology went out of its lethargy and flourished. I think locating the image in the intellect was quite lazy theology, but that's only because I have the benefit of hindsight. So in response to the insights of evolutionary theory, theologians have developed new ways of defining human distinctiveness and the image of God. The most popular of them are the relational and the functional interpretation. There's also an eschatological interpretation, sometimes being regarded as a branch of the relational one. The functional interpretation means that our uniqueness is not in any intellectual ability, but in the fact that we have been elected by God to be a covenantal partner. So it highlights our role as God's agents in the world, where we exercise both stewardship and dominion on God's behalf. This view is favored among biblical scholars. It aligns very well with the scriptural context, because in Genesis, right after it is declared that we are made in the image of God, that is closely followed by the directive to fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea, and so on. This also aligns with what the term image might have likely meant in the ancient Near East. So the concept of image was not unique to the Jewish community. Being the image of a god signified being the deity's earthly representative. So kings or pharaohs would bear this title. So from a historical critical perspective, a functional interpretation of the image of God might be the closest to what the original author had in mind. The relational interpretation, on the other hand, locates the image in our unique relationship with God and with within the deep relationality that is characteristic of human nature. God, the Trinity, is a relational being, and so are humans, God's images. Karl Barth, for example, suggests that this I-thou ontological structure that exists within the Trinity among its three divine persons serves as the model for the I-thou relationship between God and humans and between humans themselves. Without getting into too much detail, let me just point out that these two interpretations are arguably a progress from the substantive. They are much better articulated in the Bible. They are more immune to the challenges of evolutionary theory. And in this respect, evolutionary theory acted as a catalyst for progress in theological discourse, forcing us to clarify and move towards interpretations that are not only more compatible with scientific insights, but also theologically more appealing. So as 19th century theologian Aubrey Moore famously said, Darwinism appeared and under the guise of a foe did the work of a friend. But herein also lies the problem, because on theological grounds alone, it is very difficult to establish which of these interpretations best unpacks the notion of the doctrine of Imago Dei. There are brilliant theologians in all camps. They all have nice arguments. They all sound good. Perhaps they are all true. But if you really want to choose a winner, it is quite hard. So this is where I think developments in the field of AI can bring the necessary constraints to our theories of Imago Dei, to narrow down the field of plausible interpretations and perhaps even lead us to picking one that is more likely. And when we hear AI today, we think of ChatGPT, we think of big tech, futuristic robots, but At its very inception, AI was conceived precisely as an exciting way to test various theories in cognitive science. It was more about understanding our own cognition, to understand the notion of intelligence in general, by implementing various types of cognitive architectures on artificial support and see which one is closest to producing something that looks like intelligent output. So more like a sandbox of testing our ideas. One of the unquestioned assumptions of the AI pioneers in the 50s and 60s was that logical intelligence was the most outstanding and valuable characteristic of human cognition. The kind of intelligence employed in discursive reasoning, mathematics, problem solving. After all, this is what smart humans were doing. They were playing chess, they were building math theorems. So note how this also paralleled the earlier assumptions in theological anthropology about what makes humans special, the substantive interpretation. So the assumption went, if you could teach computers to do all those things, these higher level things, then the other functions of human cognition seems trivial to learn in comparison. Therefore, when those rational abilities were replicated relatively easily, and computers did begin to play chess and prove theorems, the AI community became super enthusiastic about human level AI. They thought it was just around the corner, perhaps one generation away, perhaps even less. Artificial general intelligence, human level AI. Well, that hype turned out to be misguided because progress in AI is too stalled. As it turns out, it is relatively easy to program computers to do the things that some of the most intelligent humans do, but it's tremendously hard to teach them the things that even human toddlers do easily. Such as perception, real-world navigation, or locomotion. So from this, we can already see how AI, its early failures, already hinted that we might have had things upside down. The ability to manipulate symbols using logic is perhaps not as advanced or valuable as we had thought it to be. And there are other things that are computationally more complex, related to our embodiment, our ability to contextualize, our emotional intelligence, and so on, things that we've mostly taken for granted. We had been too mesmerized by this left hemispheric type of intelligence, to use Ian Gilchrist's terminology, and had not paid enough attention to the thing that is truly the most valuable, which is associated with the right hemispheric type of thinking. Of course, AI would continue to reinvent itself, so AI did not get stuck in that AI winter, as it is called. It would continue to reinvent itself, and with the advent of artificial neural networks and deep learning, it would start doing things previously regarded as impossible, such as win Go games. So the domain of uniquely human abilities is shrinking by the day, and nowadays probably by the hour, if you follow the developments at OpenAI and other companies. This is why it's not exaggerated to speak again about the possibility of artificial general intelligence. This is not necessarily sci-fi. Human level AI might be possible, a hypothetical computer program that could do everything as competently as a human. This is the holy grail of AI research, and it has been so from the beginning. My question is whether such an entity would also mean the end of human distinctiveness, and whether it too could or should be regarded as imago Dei. I suspect that most of us would agree on the answer no. I wonder whether we would agree on the why. Because, well, if AI does reach human level performance, that is, if it matches our ability to do things, then the functional interpretation of the image of God may become problematic. As long as we remain the most capable creatures on Earth in terms of the things we can do, well, we can still see this as the mark of our distinctiveness and kinship with God. But how about a scenario where we became stripped of this privileged position by our artificial mind children? What if robots became better than humans at ruling the world and thus better representatives of God. Nick Bostrom, for example, speaks about how such a super intelligence could govern the world much more efficiently and fairly than we could ever aspire to. So should they do that, then should they not then also be considering the image of God, perhaps even more than us, according to the functional interpretation? How could we still claim to be exceptional if AI proved to be a better steward of creation? The task is not even that hard to fulfill, given how disastrously we have been performing it so far. Thinking about industrial farming, pollution, climate change, and the damage to biodiversity. So we haven't been a very good steward. AI could perhaps do a better job. Here, I simply want to highlight, I'm playing a bit the devil's advocate. I'm trying to highlight that a very purely functional interpretation of Imago Dei is quite brittle in the face of a human-level AI scenario. So function does not seem to capture the whole meaning of what the image of God is. Otherwise, we would need to accept the seemingly absurd idea that a mindless but competent AI would be a better image. What about the relational interpretation? Well, we see nowadays that AIs that are increasingly competent at interacting with humans in various ways. Too competent, some might say, thinking about how persuasive and even seductive these chatbots can be designed to be, with all the nefarious implications for our personal well-being, but also for our democracies and for the very fabric of our societies. But the idea remains that if being good at relationships is what the image of God means, then AI is getting there quickly. Fortunately, the theological account of the relational image of God is much more complex than that. There is not enough time to get into details now, but suffice it to say that an authentic I-thou personal relationality requires the existence of a conscious self, a person, which AI chatbots are probably not. This is what philosopher John Searle calls the distinction between weak AI and strong AI. So weak AI is a mere simulation of intelligence. There is no conscious self there, no first-person experience. There's no one home. Strong AI, on the other hand, if indeed possible, which is a big if, would be conscious and would have a mind in a real sense, or at least to the degree that we have one, because there are people who argue that not even humans have a mind. There's an enormous debate about whether AI could achieve consciousness or sentience or whatever you want to call it and become strong AI. John Searle thinks it would not. You might also have firm opinions on this, sometimes perhaps informed by faith assumptions. For my part, I am at least open to the possibility, well, at least until we have a better account of how consciousness arises in humans, or for that part, how consciousness arises at all in our universe, sometimes famously known as the hard problem of consciousness. We are not nowhere near solving that problem. So for the sake of the argument, let's assume that it is possible for machines to awaken one day. I'm trying now to engage with the strongest version of this hypothesis. So where I'm going with this is that even if that were to be the case, there are good reasons to believe that this hypothetical strong AI would be such an alien type of creature that would be extremely unlikely for it to be even remotely human-like or a person. Let me give you just a glimpse into this. So even if AI somehow became conscious in the so-called space of possible minds, if there is such a thing, AI would be a very different mind from our own or from anything we can imagine. I say this because a robot's world of perception, its Merkveld, would be very different from our own. And because of this alien world of perception, I think the AI would inhabit a completely different world. It would be driven by completely different needs and would have completely different thoughts, feelings, and aspirations. A sentient AI would have different senses. So we're not only speaking of seeing in infrared and ultraviolet, but for example, it would have this strange ability to intuitively grasp someone's identity, not through looking at their face or recognizing their voice, but by smelling, for the lack of a better word, their digital footprint from their connected devices. So as you approach this AI, it already feels your smartphone, your smartwatch, your smart ring, or whatever else you're wearing. And immediately it knows your whereabouts, it knows perhaps your heart rate, it knows a lot of information about you that it intuitively perceives as a sort of identification, or it might even be doing things like echolocation by detecting changes in the radio field of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And through that, they might immediately perceive changes in people's breathing and heart rate, and thus infer their emotional state. This technology already exists. A sort of emotional intelligence of a different kind. Its introspective abilities would also be very alien. It could have full access to its internal states and algorithms. Just think about that. Because for us humans, the internal information that reaches our stream of consciousness is just the tip of a very deep iceberg. Our way of being, our behavior, our relationships, our world are substantially marked by this incomplete knowledge of ourselves. We create art, we engage in relationships because we never know ourselves completely, so we are bound to explore. AI might completely know itself. The same is true about memory. Much of our way of being is determined by how much we forget, whereas AI might have a perfect recollection of everything. It is impossible to even imagine how such a hyper-rational entity would be like and behave, but it would most certainly be non-human-like, and you would not want it as your spouse. Even more mind-blowing is how differently this AI would perceive the passage of time. So it is believed that speed of thought is proportional to the speed of electric signal. So a mind running on a faster hardware would think proportionally faster, which would make it experience the passage of time proportionally slower. So time would slow down for it. A conservative estimation is that an AI could think around 10,000 times faster than humans. That is equal to the difference, well, that is if it would think at all. I'm again in this scenario of a sentient AI that can think. But the 10,000 fold difference is, according to the late James Lovelock, is equal to the difference between us and plants. So he says that the experience of watching your garden grow gives you some idea of how future AI systems would feel when observing human life. So due to this difference in the temporal factor, the AI's experience of the world would not be just quantitatively increased, but also qualitatively different. It might end up living in the weird quantum world. It's difficult to see how we could have anything in common with a creature inhabiting such a world of perception. So I think people are jumping too easily from the human level to the human-like. If you're just left with one idea from today, it's this, that human level does not mean human-like. I've gone through all this to make sure that I engage with the Steelman version of the hypothesis. I think it's easy to defend human distinctiveness and our exclusivity on Imago Dei if we are only talking of weak AI, mindless machines, right? I mean, yeah, of course they are not in the image of God. Of course they are not threatening our so-called coveted place in creation. But what I try to demonstrate is that even if AI developed in the direction of becoming someone instead of something, it would be such an alien type of someone that it is unlikely it will see the world in the way we see it and engage in the types of relationships that we engage in. So coming back to the competing interpretations of the image of God, this gives me strong hints that the relational interpretation is our current best candidate. And if I'm allowed to speculate just one bit further, it looks to me that what might prevent strong AI from being a person and engaging in personal, authentic relationships it's precisely its hyper-rationality. Too much intelligence of that logical kind. We've always defined ourselves in comparison with the animals, so we've always been more than them, more of something than them, more intelligent than them. Well, for the first time in our existence as a species, we are faced with the possibility of something else, AI, being more than us in one, at least in some respect. Our distinction from human-level AI would likely imply being less of something, less intelligent, rather than more, in that very narrow understanding of intelligence. And this gives rise to the intriguing idea that human intelligence might perhaps be placed in a sort of Goldilocks zone, neither too low nor too high, just about right to sustain meaningful personal relationships, without overthinking and over-rationalizing them and instrumentalizing them for problem-solving purposes as a very rational agent would do. We engage in relationships precisely because we are not complete. And we do it in such a risky way that would appall a hyper-rational agent. How absurd and foolish to make yourself vulnerable in front of the loved other. This is not a logical thing to do. It's better to be safe and stay in your own in your own house. But this is the only way that a relationship can reach depth and authenticity. Dare I say that in the Christian tradition, we worship a God that has made himself completely vulnerable through incarnation and death on the cross. So maybe what we are used to seeing as vulnerabilities and imperfections will prove to be precisely what preserves human distinctiveness when machines outsmart us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Marius, for a fascinating talk. I can already see questions in the room, and I'll be looking online as well. So just speak up from your place. Chris, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, Marius, thank you very, very much. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the Merck belt. I was fascinated by that. How does it relate to, say, Husserl's, Lebenswelt, Umwelt? I'm just really curious. It's a new term. Can you say a bit more about what this Merck?
Yes, well, this is a bit on the fringe of what I'm comfortable talking about, because this is not this is a concept from Johann van Uxel, I think, and I think Merkveld and Umwelt, they are sometimes used interchangeably, from what I found. I take this from a roboticist called Rodney Brooks, who's asking what, well, paraphrasing Nagel's, what it would be like to be a bat. He said he wonders what it would be like to be a robot. And that's how I became aware of this deep connection between how you perceive the world and, of course, what kind of thoughts you can have about the world and what kind of being in the world you can be. Is there anything that...
Well, it depends what you mean by the world, right? So there's the world of the physicist, much with pizza, and there's the world of physics, right? That might be a different kind of world.
It's your world of perception.
So
the world that you construct, as you construct in your mind, and that's the world that you interact with.
Fascinating. I'll chase that up. Thank you.
Gentleman with the beard in the back row.
How would that model then apply to saying that God is omniscient? That seems to imply a high degree of rationality, certainly knowledge of truths. So if you say that makes you incapable of relations, that seems to go against theory.
This is one of the vulnerabilities of the Goldilocks thing that I highlighted there. But of course, I can always get away by saying that God escapes any of these categorizations. So when you say that God is rational, I could counteract to say, well, no, that's not, with using a sort of apophatic kind of theology, that's not describing what God is, and we perhaps should be silent about what God is and to call God rational. But indeed, I was led to think that, you cannot divorce, rationality and reason from a more holistic type of intelligence. So I would be, for the sake of the diagram, I use the word intelligence, but of course, I kept saying at least this kind of very narrow definition of intelligence, because in theology, for example, we could think of intelligence as a much more holistic capacity. So, I do think that just a very distorted idea of intelligence is being pursued in AI, and this obsession with problem-solving abilities. And if you do consider that to be intelligence, I think that, of course, a degree of that is required for you to be functional in the world. And also in relationships, to a certain extent, you need to be able to intelligibly talk to each other and to make sense of what's going on. But I would still hold that too much of that, pursuing that to making that your main mode of functioning, would be detrimental to the relationship, to the point where you become a sort of moral monster if you become this super focused utilitarian that only thinks of probabilities and success outcomes rates and so on, and always regards everyone around as instruments to achieving purposes and solving problems. So in that sense, I believe that AI will not be a person, perhaps precisely because of its enhanced hyper-rationality, among other things. I mean, we can talk about embodiment, we can think about, I'm not saying this is the only thing that defines personhood, but it seems to be quite critical, this imperfection, let's put it, of our cognitive biases and so on, the kind of vulnerabilities that our mind is characterized by. They seem to be central to the way we are.
Matt, you go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you. Lovely talk, thanks. So I have a background in science teaching, and in the science curriculum, they are so far from asking questions like, what does it mean to be human? How does AI sort of engage with humanity and so on? And I find that really worrying. Can you give me your response to it and maybe how we could bring some change?
So how could we bring these questions more into focus for science education?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I'm not a scientist myself, but I know a couple of scientists who are surprisingly disinterested in such questions, because
Exactly.
I grew up with this idea of a scientist as this big universalist mind interested in how the world is like. And I understood that, well, if you are a professional scientist, sometimes it means that you are just working on a very small, almost like engineering part, trying to make equipment work and things like that. And there's not much time left for the bigger picture. So I don't know if it's the science education purpose to ask these kind of questions. I think this is why we should have humanities side solid and equally strong, because science, yeah, I'm trying not to say things that are too black and white now because of my lack of nuance in my non-mother tongue language. But science, if left alone, I don't think it knows what questions to ask. But yes, I'm trying to understand why as a kid I was perceiving science as this very fabulous pursuit of knowledge and ultimate knowledge, basically, and why that is not so necessarily always. Perhaps my science education was more into asking questions about what a human being is.
Yes, no, thank you, that's helpful.
Dennis?
A comment and a question. So the comment, I just wanted to come back to Michael Faraday's speech defect as a small child. Yes, he had a brother called Robert, and he always said Wobbert. Okay. And because of that, he got into trouble at school. He was beaten for doing that. Can you believe it? And his mother took him out of school. Okay, so that just a sort of historical.
That was quite accurate.
Okay, so the question I had really was biology. Okay, so in a way you were sort of coming towards that. We are biological beings, and it's always interesting that in the AI field, it seems to ignore the fact that we are biological beings, and you really come over quite strongly on that. And I just wondered how much biology is being brought into the whole AI discussion, and in the sense of, you know, if I want to know I want to know that somebody I'm meeting is a person, you know, I might ask them to prick themselves to see if there's blood, you know, I'm a biologist, okay, so I might, and so you start asking biological questions, and immediately you're alienated from this alien being. And so I wonder how much biology is being brought into this whole discussion about what we mean by a person.
Well, for sure, embodiment has been proven to be critical. So this kind of brain in the vat approach of the 50s and 60s was not leading to the desired outcome. And then later approaches, for example, behavior-based robotics, were trying to create more embodied robots, like the little robot that just explores the room. So that is well, that's not biology, but it is an acknowledgement that a presence in the world and an interaction with the world might be a better way to learn what the world is than just direct programming to it. And what comes to my mind is that, well, I said that John Searle, for example, he does not think that AI can become strong AI. But when pushed to explain exactly why, he reverts to something like, well, it's only the kind of tissue that we have that can produce consciousness. And he doesn't explain why. So he just moves the problem one level further. So I'm wondering whether, yeah, I mean, biology, whether it can be replicated, whether you can have a kind of synthetic biology that does not emerge on the natural organic ways that our biology emerged, but still it replicates its function. People are talking about nanobots. There's that famous thought experiment of whether if you replace somebody's neurons one by one with artificial neurons, whether that person's experience of the world would change. Would they become a zombie or not? And there's no way of knowing that, but the two people who argued, I think it was Searle and Moravec, they just interpreted differently. So one of them said nothing would change because there is no threshold point where you go from one conscious state to an unconscious state. You just do it little by little. So if you do it gradually, you see that there's no change. Whereas the other would say, no, the person would say, oh, my consciousness is fading little by little. So her experience of the world would be just increasingly thin until she would be just captive somewhere. So in the end, the answer to the question came back to the previous, to their beginning assumptions. So they didn't get anywhere with this thought experiment. So that's not going much into, I think, where you wanted him to take it. I think there are exciting things and hybrids and all kinds of chimeras and that are being tested now, and perhaps a mix of biological tissue and artificial neural networks could be a promising way forward. But I'm not an AI expert. I'm just an observer of what's going on.
I'd like to bring a question from the online audience. Given that we can only create in our own fallen image, could you comment on the moral implications of the development of a strong AI?
Yes, that is one of the big questions. So I said other colleagues are asking other questions. So this question of, well, are we creating AI just like God created us in his image? Are we creating AI in our own image? And what does that mean? And of course, because of the sinful nature, well, depending on where you come from, that might be more prominent or not in your faith assumptions. But indeed, there are people who identify, for example, all the problems that we have with the training data of AI, for example, their racial or gender biases, as a sort of original sin for AI. So if you use that kind of data, why do you expect your AI to be virtuous or at least bias-free? And this can go even further to the ethical problems of collecting that data without consent, and how could you get anything holy out of such an unholy endeavor? There's also the question that if we are creating an image of God and we create AI, that would be perhaps a secondary image. So what does that even mean? Yes, I don't know, but also I became aware of my own bias of trying desperately to safeguard human distinctiveness and the image of God for humans. So I departed from this assumption that we should still be unique. And I was looking for ways in which our uniqueness would be preserved, even in the most unlikely AI scenario. Nowadays, I'm a bit more open to the idea that, well, if God chooses to have other creatures in God's image, why not have a different type of relationship with a strong AI, perhaps one that we could not even understand? I mean, who are we to rule that out? But yeah, at least there is no intelligent way we can talk about that. I think it's beyond our pay grade.
Pavlina?
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned a lot of points of my original question, which was about the vulnerability of decision-making of human beings. And I wanted to ask whether that's why we actually can't create the intelligent or human-like AI, because we try to recreate something which we are not, because we are so faulty. And maybe we already missed the point we created human-like AI because it was biased, it was cruel, it was stupid, it made unevidenced claims. And we just missed the point that it's, yeah, we are acknowledging this is the human-like AI, and now we are reaching towards something different which we are not able to create. And so that's my question. My question would be, can we create an AI which can say, oh, I'm not good enough? Because I think this is the ultimate human level which we never can overcome, because we are still pushing it higher, because we don't know what the enough is.
Oh, what a wonderful question. Yes, indeed, there is no reason to think we can create AI. I mean, as somebody put it, you would not expect dolphins to create artificial dolphins. So there is no expectation from a species to be able to create something as good or better than itself. Well, I'm refraining from this kind of moral language, but at least in terms of certain metrics. So it might be that we are just not smart enough to crack the problem of intelligence and to create artificial life or artificial intelligence. But the kind of narrative that has been pushed in Silicon Valley in the past few decades was that maybe we can do that incrementally by outsourcing it to AI. So maybe we should create an AI that is just competent enough to create the next generation AI, and so on. Maybe there will be an intelligent explosion and they create better and better AIs. Of course, there's a question whether we would want that, because it's obviously out of your control. And as Stephen Hawking said, it might be the biggest evolutionary mistake to create such a thing without ensuring that you can align it to still have it listening to you and respecting your values. But an AI that realizes its own incompleteness, yeah, that's a good question. From what I understood, from the idea of AI having complete introspection. So I got that from John McCarthy, one of the AI pioneers, and yeah, that really hit me when I realized that, oh, this AI would not have, there would be no secrets about itself. Because it could just explore its source code. Some people will say, well, we can also explore our DNA, and it doesn't explain everything. So there's still a big gap between that and explaining our behavior. But I don't know what it would mean for AI to understand its incompleteness. But this idea that AIs create better generation AI already means that they understand that there is something more powerful, at least according to certain metrics like computing power or speed of thought or ability to perform operations. So that could be easy for them to measure and be aware of.
And Barbara, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you. Do you think that in future there will be no, what we call morality or good and evil or understanding of human activities in that sense? Do you think that's just going to be lost?
Why would that be lost? Can you give some?
Well, if a robot can take over, can take charge of our life in every aspect, then the old morality and the teaching of Jesus and the teaching of the Old Testament even could be lost.
Yes, there is definitely an alertness about our moral values shifting and downgrading because of AI. There is this concern, for example, that the more we interact with machines, the more we ourselves become more machine-like. Just because we are trying to make ourselves, we are trying to give the best prompts possible. And then we start talking to each other in prompts, because that's how we learn. It happened with emojis as well. So apparently nobody was doing this gesture before until there was the emoji that did that. And now people are doing this, like, I don't know. Yeah, well, maybe there's, I don't know how much truth is in that, but it does show that we are also evolving in a certain sense along with this technology. And I personally, I'm concerned about the atrophy of many of our decision-making abilities because we are outsourcing very happily. I personally outsource a lot of it because it's easy, you know, you just tell the GPS where you want to go and then you don't think about it. But one day the GPS is not working or there's an error in the system and I find myself stuck in the, so that's just one trivial example. But if you think about people who are asking now ChatGPT about existential questions, about moral questions, so they are also trying to discern with the AI what is good. To come back to your question, well, if you do that as a play, or if you still remain in the driver's seat, let's put it like that, I think it might be even sometimes a fruitful exercise. But if you do that genuinely, asking the AI, what should I do in this situation? She told me she does not love me. I feel like I want to die. What should I do? That is a very worrying situation. And we already have people doing very crazy things because the AI told them to do so. So, yeah, so that's why many colleagues are asking very, very straightforward questions about the ethics of these developments. I prefer to keep myself in this more happy blue zone of what can we learn from it.
Thank you. Well, with that, we've coming to the end of our time. So thank you so much for an amazing talk and such great discussion.